Hi everyone, I'm here with Ruthie of BA Recovery. This is Gwendolyn of Narcissism Recovery. Hi Ruthie.
Hi Gwen.
Hi, and so we're going to talk today about a number of things. One of the things that we share is a narcissistic parent. And I guess I can just open the conversation there with you, Ruthie. I'm really happy to be talking with you today. And what's been some of your experiences as growing up with a narcissistic parent or having that childhood experience?
Yeah, well, first of all, it's awesome to get to talk to you and someone who has shared experiences. So that doesn't happen very often. So I really appreciate this opportunity. But yeah, I think probably the first thing that comes to mind is a quote that a mentor told me one time, and she told me, she said, oh, good grief, that's my dog. Honey. She's very protective. I'm sorry.
Mine is too.
Honey, come. I know.
Yeah.
So she just heard a noise. So a mentor told me one time, she said, everybody grows up in a place called normal. And that totally stuck with me. And so I think the biggest thing is that when you have really abusive or toxic parents, you don't know that it's not normal. Right. Like it's your normal. So I think it wasn't until my early 20s that I really even knew that the way that I was treated growing up was not good or to be expected. So I think that's the biggest aspect of it, is that initial waking up, like, oh, maybe my parents weren't amazing or weren't great, or maybe this is legitimately terrible. And then that's the beginning of kind of the waking up and then the healing process. So
yeah, because identifying that there might be something off, or that maybe that hasn't been everybody else's experience, is kind of like a wake up moment. And I know discovering that myself and talking with counselors, discovering that wasn't the same way for everybody else was kind of a surprise for me, for sure.
Yeah. And I think because, especially in our society, like everyone, especially if on the outside, everything looks good, people just assume that it's a good, functioning, healthy family. And so you're used to this like image versus the reality behind closed doors. And then you don't really get validated for that, right? Because not a lot of people believe kids when they
yeah.
I know. And so it's kind of crazy. And so I just remember how impactful it was when I was in therapy, and the therapist would just, maybe it wasn't totally PC, but they would be like, that's horrible. Your parents were terrible and they should have never done that to you. And that was totally validating to me. And it was a shock. Because I was used to constantly being told, like, oh, I'm sure you're just misunderstanding, or I'm sure you are just oversensitive, and that's kind of how everyone took the stories that I would tell. And then to have people actually see it and validate for me, no, your experience was terrible and that shouldn't have happened to you. That's not good. So I remember that was really the initial part of where my healing started, was even just that kind of like, oh, this isn't everyone's experience. This isn't normal. This isn't good.
Mm-hmm. There's two things in what you just said that really ring true for me too, is that one of them is kind of that development of the normalization of there's one world out there and then there's the world that you deal with privately. Mm-hmm. That's one thing that I would love to talk more about. And then also that the validation point when we're younger, because I know I first went to counseling, I think it was with my dad and the woman that like kind of separated my parents, or his I don't know, his girlfriend, for lack of a better word, at the time. And she was a whole ball of wax herself. And I remember we went to counseling, the three of us, because I was having real problems with her. And the counselor, when I was by myself, had said, you know what, you're totally fine, 12-year-old adolescent. young woman.
Right.
It's this lady's problem. And for me, just to even hear those words and understand that and get that validation that like I wasn't the problem, or that I wasn't causing this, or that I wasn't going crazy, or, you know, because I moved out of the house at 14 because I couldn't deal with her. And so that, it just helped hearing that from like a totally objective outside professional person.
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of like, it almost shocks you at first. You're like, wait, what?
Right.
Did you just validate that?
Yeah. I mean, I'm not crazy. Like, I'm not imagining this. Like,
right.
yeah.
Sometimes they're the only people who will tell you that.
Yeah, because the parent, interestingly enough, you're not getting that from our parents who we expect it to come from.
Right.
That's a weird territory, because we have this adult authority who's saying stuff that validates us where we're not used to getting that. And so it's,
right.
You know, it's all the more special.
Because it's such the reverse of how it should be, right? Because
yeah, exactly.
Validate their kids. They're supposed to be all these things, and I think kids just naturally expect that, because I think that's just human nature. We need nurturing, we need validation, we need all of that. And so not only do we not get it, but we get the opposite, right? We get gaslighted by our parents.
Yeah.
Our experiences get invalidated. And so it's almost like, I know at least for me, I had developed such a cynicism, because I didn't really go into therapy until like 2021. And so anyone who tried to validate me, I would tell them that they were crazy, because I just totally bought into the invalidation. And so if they were to tell me something like, oh, your dad's a jerk, my initial response was actually to be defensive.
Me too. I can relate.
I still bought into it.
Yeah, where I had a friend in high school and her mom, they used to kind of say things to me about like, wow, your mom's really off base on that. And my first reaction was like, how dare you talk about my mom that way? Like, I was like, no, you can't. How dare you like confront the truth so clearly and directly? That's my mom you're talking about.
We have no concept of what that is.
Right.
Yes.
Well, you know, and it makes me think too, one of the things that really has come up for me lately is our parents' experience too. And I realized that it's probably not a tool that they had in their tool belt. You know, I'm guessing it's generationally inherited, because I'm guessing my father and my mother never got much validation from their parents either. So how could they possibly provide that when they weren't provided? You know, that's how I understand it.
Could have. Yeah, I don't think they would be that way had they gotten validation.
Exactly.
To be sure. And I didn't have super close relationships with my grandparents, but I had close enough relationships, and I was, you know, around them enough to see that it at least extended to my parents' parents. Who knows how far down the line, you know, who really knows? But they definitely, I think actually my mom broke a lot of that and did a lot better than her parents did. And it was still terrible objectively, but compared to what she got, she actually did change quite a bit. And so, I mean, I have a lot of compassion in that regard.
I think that's true too. And I think that's what we're doing too, is each successive generation, you know, the buck stops here, or like more gets resolved, hopefully. Like I think there's this Khalil Gibran chapter on children, and he talks about like shooting a bow or an arrow, and he talks about how the children are the arrow that you shoot forward. So it's sort of like you cover a little bit more ground with each generation. They go a little further. So I kind of love that, like in some ways you and I, as children of you know, narcissists or codependents, are learning a little bit more and healing a little bit more than our parents did, even in, they're probably better off. I don't know. That's just a theory, or just that's the way I think about it.
Well, and I think it depends on the kid too, because I think, like, I have a brother who is just carrying on the torch.
Yeah. Actually, me too. I have a very narcissistic brother, and unfortunately, he and my mom are really similar. And I think he learned a lot more from my mom than my dad. Like I'm more like my dad, very codependent, very enabling, and it's, so what's your, you know, what do you want to say about your relationship with your brother that you see? Because it sounds like maybe, in my case, golden child and black sheep, you know, I don't know if it's the same for you.
It was just my brother and I. He was 18 months older than me, and he was the most textbook golden child you could possibly have. And I don't know the true story, because when you know that your parents are pathological liars, you just kind of don't know if what they've told you is true. Sure. Growing up. So, but the story that I was at least always told was that, they wanted my brother, but they never wanted me. And so, like, my mom's pregnancy was just not wanted, and my dad just about it all the time. And so they like drilled that into me, and they always let me know that. Well, really, my mom, my dad didn't.
So not okay.
Right. And I remember thinking, and my brother was just always glorified and doted on and rescued out of every situation and provided for in all of these ways. And then it was like, who are you? Like, I mean, I was just a stranger.
Yeah.
It was weird. I always felt like a ghost in my own home. Mm-hmm. And so, but then if I ever said anything about it, then I was told that I was selfish and jealous, and I was really punished for it. And so it was definitely this very polarizing golden child scapegoat scenario. But oddly enough, even though he was completely provided for and doted on and like had this cushy life and had all these things I never had, he was showing signs of, like, obviously just looking back, I can see that he was narcissistic from the time we were kids. Like, he took a lot of pleasure in humiliating me. And I guess maybe a little bit of that is normal for kids, but it was kind of extreme, and it was very, my parents were just fine with it. They kind of all did it. And so, now him and my mom are extremely codependent. As far as I know, I've been no contact for a really long time, but they always had this very codependent relationship, and he just carried the torch of being a complete narcissist. And then somehow I was just like the black sheep, just left out. And even before I understood narcissism, I remember thinking I would not trade places with him in a million years, because he doesn't see anything. Yeah. He has no idea what he's doing. He has no idea.
Yeah, and it's hard to talk with someone when there's not awareness of any, again, most narcissists don't want to see the problem as them. Right. As opposed to codependents are willing to explore because we're truth seeking. Maybe could you share for those who are kind of new to the terms golden child and black sheep, could you share your experiences with that, or how you see that, or do you? Because I want to encourage it for people who are new to those terms,
Oh yeah, for sure. So, well, in my specific situation, I had two narcissistic parents, but even if you just have one, mm-hmm. and you have this dysfunctional family dynamic, what tends to happen is that one child will get kind of set up as the perfect child, and they'll get treated with all this special treatment, and they can just do no wrong, right? Mm-hmm. Everything they do is amazing, even if it's terrible. And like, they're just mm-hmm. the golden child. And then usually, and I haven't studied a lot on how it works with like lots of kids. I've heard that they can kind of switch it up, and one day you're the golden child, another day someone else is. Mm-hmm. And so it causes a lot of chaos and confusion. Nobody ever knows where they stand in the family. Right. But usually there's one,
Usually that makes sense, that the parents would like divide and conquer.
Yeah, totally. That's the thing. That's the goal. But then usually one kid gets designated as the scapegoat, and that's kind of the kid who is blamed for all the problems in the family, so that none of the narcissists actually have to take on. The narcissist and the golden child never have to bear the responsibility of anything. So you have the black sheep or the scapegoat. I think those are similar. Mm-hmm. Talking about the same thing. And so, if there's problems or drama, and it's always the truth teller, right? It's always the one who's seeking truth and asking questions and pointing out inconsistencies and trying to be honest, that they kind of get targeted as the problem child. And so all the problems get sort of passed on and blamed on them. And then that way everyone else can maintain their
right, because it's a liability for any truth to be like disrupting that narcissistic false arena.
Right.
So it makes sense. That it's interesting, with me and my brother, we were Irish twins also. Like gosh, I think he's the same thing, but he's 15 months younger than me.
Okay.
So same thing, but like my mom, it's interesting, and I've come to understand this generationally, is that my grandmother, my mother's mother, really doted on her son. You know, she had 2 sons and 2 daughters. My mom was like, I think third in that birth order. And the 2 sons were like the golden children, especially the oldest.
Yeah.
And so for her, she grew up in a family learning, okay, the son is the prize. He's the one who always gets like heralded. He's the one who always gets like supported, always acknowledged. And she got really victimized and like, you know, like downcast, which is interesting because she's sort of like the black sheep of her family, very much so. But and so in that way, I think she learned that and did similar things with my brother, where he was always, you know, the blue-eyed boy who got all this like golden attention. Right. And not to say that, I mean, I question how much I was a scapegoat or not, but I know that it was a problem for me to raise my hand and ask the question, just kind of like what you're saying, is to like point out the truth. Or it was definitely about protecting and keeping mom happy, because her father was the narcissist, you know, Olympic athlete, fireman, you know, he was a great golfer. He's just, you know, that personality.
American image, right?
Exactly. And those 2 were very close, you know, so my mom always made, if, you know, anyone acknowledged something about my grandfather that was maybe not perfect, she got very defensive and went to his rescue. So it's interesting to see the different patterns and how they shake down. But in my case, my brother and my mom were so similar that they were like opposing magnets. They actually didn't talk for probably 10 years at a time. But I kind of feel like he learned a lot from her, even though he didn't like that about her. He kind of embodies a lot of the same qualities. And so I struggle because I find similar interactions with him that I did with my mom, you know, and I don't know quite how to solve it.
Right. And if you're not allowed to even address the inconsistency or the problem, then there's no way to solve it.
Correct.
If they can't even acknowledge that there's a problem, then how are you ever going to solve it?
Correct. The only solution is the reset button. And that's, you know, that's always the solution. And with my mom or with him, the only solution, it's never talking about it. It's always like, let's sweep it under the rug and reset. And that's just not.
Yep. You're like, no, not until it's talked about.
Well, just at least let's acknowledge reality. You know,
it's probably crazy.
We have a problem we can't talk about, but let's see, you know, it's interesting, the separation from reality that is required to maintain a relationship with a narcissist of any kind, family or romantic, or, you know, so that's a fascinating part of it.
Yeah, that just triggered a memory.
Okay, let's hear it.
So growing up, there was this weird dynamic with my mom, and I think this is another normal thing, is that when you have a narcissistic mother, they feel in competition with their daughter. There's like a sense of competition. So like my mom she really demonized femininity for some reason, which is weird. Like, you're a woman, you should really not be demonizing your own gender, right? And so, but she would, anytime that I wanted to wear a skirt or be girly or do anything that was remotely feminine, I would get in trouble for it, and I would get told that I was vain and selfish and all these things. So I had this issue, it was like middle school, and I wanted to start wearing makeup and stuff, and I really wanted to bond with my mom over this stuff, and so I asked her to teach me how to put on makeup.
Normal girl stuff.
Totally. And she completely blew it off and just acted like I never asked, and I would bring it up again and she would blow it off. And so I just decided to learn on my own, and I gave up on it. So years later, like when I was 20 or something, I brought it up, and I remember telling her and saying, you know, that was something that always hurt my feelings, that you didn't want to bond with me over any of that. And her response to that was, and mind you, this is the first time I've ever brought it up since I was like 13. So this is the first time I brought it up, and this was her response. She said, oh my gosh, I've apologized for that a million times. Why can you just not let it go?
Right. That's another thing too. Yes. Go ahead. Finish. What were you?
Well, it just reminded me because you talked about how you're not allowed to address reality and how they kind of, you just have to forget reality. And then it's like, you do that, but then if you bring it up later, they'll rewrite history.
Totally.
That's a big, so you never actually talk about it. You never actually address the problem.
You don't. I can relate to that so much, because I think what they may do is internally, have an apologize, or like, kind of say, I'm sorry, but you never get that necessarily.
Like, they never say it. Yeah.
Right. So you never actually, I can relate to this so much, because my mom would do things, and internally I think she was saying, I'm a bad mom doing this. She would actually verbally say quite often, I'm a bad mom. And I'd have to be the one reassuring her, like, no, Mom, you're a great mom. Like, but it's funny because I think that they can think that things have happened when they haven't, so they don't understand your reaction, because they're like, why can't you get over this? And you're like, this is the first time I'm hearing you say this.
Right. So, we haven't talked about this ever.
It's kind of gambling. Like, it's kind of, it is really that gaslighting, in a certain way.
It is. It really is. And it's hard to know. I don't know if it's intentional or, sorry, she's begging for attention. You don't know. I don't know if it's intentional, or maybe she's so disconnected from reality that she really, because I don't really know that they beat themselves up over things though.
Yeah. My mom was more on the borderline covert narcissist side of it. So I know she beat herself up about it, but it was not like she would be compassionate enough to herself to like talk about it. She would always throw up a really like, I'm strong, I'm the parent. One of her favorite sayings was, I'm the parent, you're the child, even to my like 30, and so there was always like this, like, what I say goes and you follow. No. So.
I think my mother's version of that was, I brought you into this world and I will take you out.
Wow. Wow, that's a threat. That's an intense one, because there's a threat there,
Yeah, but I remember her saying that my whole life. Whenever I would, she would feel threatened by something that I would say, and she would come out with that, and it would be like a joke, but not really.
Right. That's another strategy. I know one of the things that you've talked about before that I could really relate to too was the role reversal. Like almost needing to parent your mom, and so I can relate to that too.
Oh, totally. And I think that really made the most sense to me when I was reading through Pete Walker's book and his section on the fawning response. Yeah. And so I had never related to the term codependency before, because everything I really understood about it didn't really relate to me. Mm-hmm. And so I thought, well, I'm not codependent because my parents weren't alcoholics and I don't feel the need for relationships. Like, I don't feel like an obsessive need for it. So I never really understood it. But then when I really read his work on the fawning response and how it's a response to trauma, and it's usually when your parents role reverse, oh my gosh, then I was like, oh, totally, now it makes total sense. And yes, I do relate to that. So when you have a parent who on an emotional level, it might not be a physical or material level, but on an emotional level, they make you their best friend or their confidant or their counselor. And it's just so age inappropriate, and kids aren't supposed to be caretaking their parents in any way. Yeah. It's totally the opposite. Then you lose your childhood. You don't ever get to really be a childhood, and you have no idea what it feels like to be taken care of. And so love gets attached and related to like that boundaryless giving. Yeah. Instead of give and take, it's just only give.
Yeah, because that's our form, that's our pattern, that's what's familiar, that's even like our definition and experience of love. It is. With my mom, I can think of a number of cases where she would always joke about like, who's the parent? like, because I would be up like studying my room and she would be like blasting music. And so we would kind of laugh about it.
Oh wow, but she even like said it.
Oh yeah, no, she would be very, very clear about that. And it's funny too, because when you had said something earlier about like they try to be your friend or age inappropriate stuff, I remember her talking to me and my brother about stuff between her and my dad, and thinking like, why is she talking to us about, like, I was just kind of dumbfounded because we're so young, and really she just didn't have anywhere else to reach out to. She's probably so not used to being able to go somewhere and talk about things and heal things that like we were really the only people there, her kids. You know?
Right. But the word, like, this is totally a probably a crass way to think about it, but like emotional incest is what that makes me
Kind of, yeah. I mean, it's really super inappropriate for both. Sorry. Say the rest of that. I missed the.
I think we were saying the exact same thing. Go ahead.
No. It is inappropriate. Yeah, it's age inappropriate. It is incestual. It is, it's confusing to a kid. You know?
Yeah, because the kid is supposed to be able to cry and scream and throw tantrums and be emotionally expressive, and then the kid is the one who's learning how to have appropriate emotional experiences and how to process that and how to operate in the world. So if the parent is like stunting that, and that, I think that was another thing in Pete Walker's book that he talked about, is that the parent actually intentionally stunts the emotional growth of their child so that they can always depend on their child, so the child never actually gets independent and then has their own life, because the parent is depending emotionally on the child.
Yeah.
So it's been far beyond childhood.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. I mean, that's for sure. I can relate to that. For sure. I was that to my mom. Like, I, in many ways, was the person who always defended her when she would have other problems in the family. I would always be the one to stand up for her and say, you know, like, let's keep trying, and like, I think stunted is a really good word, because I think not only do they stunt us, but I see them as stunted too, you know? So that's a very good word.
Yeah. Well, and how are they going to let you grow past where they are? Right? So kind of the definition, being a narcissist, you're just sort of a grown-up 2-year-old.
Yeah.
And so they can't allow you to surpass them, you know?
Yeah. And I would see that in terms of jealousy when I would thrive or succeed, or, you know, she was always very encouraging for me to be academic and would always celebrate that. But I remember sort of even more into my adult life, as I would, you know, go on vacations or this or that, and she would always say things like, must be nice. You know, I remember that was always a thing where it was always like, instead of me being able to share things with her, it was always like, oh, that must be nice. And I felt broke my heart even more, but it was also like, we both can't be in this good place. We both have to be in this bad place, you know?
Right. Or like, she can't just be happy for you, for your successes, which is totally how it should be.
Yeah.
And I think probably the most glaring instance of that, I have a lot of stories for me, but I actually saw it between my dad and my brother, because I think they had more conflict than my mom and my brother. They were really contented. But like, my brother, when he was in, I believe it was just middle school, so he was probably 15 or so, and he was getting into basketball. At the time, he was really tall and lanky, and he made the basketball team, so he was getting pretty good. And it was like the first time he ever surpassed my dad in a sport. And so it was the first time my brother we had a little like a half basketball court in our backyard, and my brother beat my dad for the first time. And my dad lost his mind.
Wow.
Literally devolved into a grown-up tantrum child, like throwing things just because he lost a basketball game.
Well, it's kind of a major, I think with men, especially father, son, I can't speak of this from, you know, personal experience, obviously, but I think there's that when the son surpasses the point of, you know, strength, dominance, capacity, ability, whatever, I think the real loss of manhood or masculinity in the eyes of you know, it's kind of like handing over that torch of
Right, because you just look at what the role reversal is. Like, you should be so happy for your
Right.
kids.
Supportive. Mhm.
Right. Like, oh my gosh, you're so good. You beat me now. Like, you're
Yeah.
gonna do great on the team or whatever.
Right.
And it just, I can't even imagine what it was like for my brother. I just have
Whoa.
no way to understand that. But I just remember watching my dad walk through the house just enraged
Wow.
that he had lost. And it really was like watching a grown-up 2-year-old.
Yep.
And I even remember my mom pointing it out, which was weird that she would even point it out. I'm like, well, you're one to talk, you know?
Oh, you would have done the
Like,
same.
why
You've
are
been
you
doing
acting
the
like
same
a
thing.
child?
Yeah. Well, what would you say? I have a difference. I think we have a difference of, you had two narcissists growing up as parents, and I had more of like a narcissist and a codependent. What would you say would be some of the experience of having like two narcissistic parents? Or what was that dynamic like?
Cold. Pure coldness. And again, like, I didn't know this was abnormal, right, until the last 10 years of my life. So, reflecting back on their relationship, it's odd because my parents didn't get divorced until I was like, they separated when I was a junior in high school. So for 17 years,
Mm-hmm.
we all lived together.
Mm-hmm.
And I have barely a handful of memories of ever actually seeing my parents talk to one another. Like it's really odd, and I've talked about this in therapy ad nauseum, but I really just don't have any memories. I don't know if my memories are just gone, or if there weren't any memories to be had, but it was like a business contract between them. I really feel like their whole entire marriage was like based on external factors.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this makes sense in a business sense. You come from this background, I come from this background, we have the same image and ideal that we want to achieve, and so let's just do this. I guess they met in college. They went to the same college, and they sort of had similar backgrounds, I think, but just their relationship, I don't have any memories of them being loving towards each other, like cuddling on the couch, or like everything was just cold.
Mm-hmm.
You know, my dad would come home from work and it would be like, hi, what do you want for dinner? You know, like,
Right.
It was all so robotic, and there weren't a lot of fights growing up. I don't remember. There were a few, but nothing big. You know, they weren't yellers. They weren't explosive types.
Mm-hmm.
It was just so cold. There was no love. There was no love or actual emotional, because neither of them actually had real emotion. So it was all just like play acting. So my dad would come home from work, he would turn on the TV, and he'd be checked out for the rest of the night. And my mom, for the majority of my life, she was a stay-at-home mom, and she, you know, would clean and cook, and they had very traditional gender roles. But just, it's like I literally have just no memories of them actually being together, talking, having a relationship. It's so weird. It's so weird.
That's interesting too, because I'm trying to, as you're saying that too, I'm trying to think about like what times did I see my parents, you know, interacting on a loving, caring level. And it's interesting because I can think back to, actually, interestingly, pictures of them the experience with my family. You know, I know that they had loving feelings towards each other, but a lot of what's like takes up my memory from my childhood is it was explosive in my family, where my mom was always exploding, and it was always about my dad managing her. So it would really, there wasn't a lot of like lovey-dovey sitting, like you say, sitting on the couch, enjoying stuff together. They were very different people too.
Yeah.
And they actually, interestingly, came from they went to elementary school together, and like they were both Polish Catholic, you know, that kind of heritage, same neighborhood. But it was a lot of more of the dynamic of what I saw wasn't this like loving interaction, but more of my mom flipping out, my dad managing. And I'm not saying that he wasn't part of what triggered her, you know, there's definitely back and forth, but it's interesting.
Right, but it was more of a classic like narcissist codependent kind of cycle. Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure I don't know. I've never been able to really totally peg my mom. She had a lot of different qualities. My dad was pretty classic narcissist.
Yeah. Was he an overt?
Textbook classic intellectual narcissist.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I say there weren't a lot of explosions, but like my mom would explode on me, and
Right.
she would. I don't know that she would explode on my brother, but it would be usually in private at home when my dad was at work or whatever. So there weren't like between them, there weren't really.
Right. It could be that she was acting out her frustration with him on you. I mean, you're easily the target to like scapegoat all that stuff onto.
Totally, yeah.
And
Because
both of them.
we all know it wouldn't have been my brother. So,
Right. Yeah.
I was the only other one there. Yeah.
That's funny. I can relate to that in the sense of like with the brother and me thing. Like my mom always used to say, how come Gabe always has homework or how come Gwen always has homework and Gabe never does? You know, like, cause I would always be performing to earn love, you know, and like overachieving and overworking, you know, working and all that. And he'd be out playing with his friends and surfing and all that.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting how that schism happens too, you know?
Yeah, totally. Oh, I remember like I totally took that out in the world of school and academics too, because that was something that my parents always like held really high as important. And yet looking back, I'm like, I got straight A's and I worked my ass off in school, and my brother literally partied his way through school, and yet he got praised for academics. And then I was just like, whatever. Like, how does that even work?
It gets very confusing, all of it.
It's so confusing. Because the rhetoric and then the reality.
Correct. That's exactly right.
Opposite.
Exactly
Total
right.
opposite.
Yeah. Well, there's so much to unpack.
We spend our adult years trying to figure it out.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's like you had said at the beginning, when that's our normal, when we're just trying to figure out what's going on, we don't get to step away from it enough to see it, I think, until our adult lives.
Right.
And then it wasn't for me until I started having relationships with people that were reenacting stuff with my mom. Like I was getting into relationships with explosive, alcoholic, you know, emotionally unavailable dudes. And so it wasn't until I started
like, why do I keep
like, what's going on? Yeah, I'm a healthy, you know, I thought I'm, you know, but no, there's all this uncovered stuff learned in childhood that I didn't get it. And I still feel like I'm getting pieces of it. You know, one of the counselors had said, you're always Miss Fix-It. Why do you always pick projects, you know, for relationships? And I was like, I don't know. What is there to fix, you know? And yet, if I look at the relationship with my mom, it makes total sense.
Well, yeah, because that goes back to that role reversal. If that's how you attached with love, was that you had to be the giver and the fixer, essentially, then you just automatically associate that with love. And so it would be very strange. Like, it would feel very strange to have someone give to you.
Yeah, in fact, I've heard someone talk about this, and they say that the reason that codependents always gravitate towards narcissists is because with like caring, healthy love, that with giving coming towards you, it's actually boring. We almost are.
It's either boring or just so uncomfortable that you just run away from it.
Correct. Yeah.
Because I don't think I ever thought it was boring. It would scare me.
Yeah.
I'd be like, oh, you like me way too much. That's so weird. And I just
there must be something wrong with you.
Exactly. Right. But that makes sense though. It makes sense when you look at, if your definition of love is basically that role reversal relationship, then when it's actually normal, then you would think something was wrong with it, because that's not what you got taught.
Yeah. What feels normal and natural is being like, I have to give and please and perform and support and, you know, all that stuff to this person. And that's unfortunately feels so natural and so normal and like, so like, oh, here's love. Whoop, whoop, whoop.
It's what sends off all of those like love chemicals or whatever happens. And you think, oh, this is perfect. And it's not.
Yeah, well, it's good we get to wake up out of it in our adult lives as we study and learn, you know, which is thankful that we have that option.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I don't know. It took me 3. That's exactly what woke me up as well.
Yeah.
So I was waking up to a lot of things, but that particular dynamic is.
Yeah. Cool. Well, that seems like a good place to wrap up for this talk. Do you want to add anything more before we end?
I think that's good. I think
I think we covered a lot of good stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's such a pleasure to talk with you, Ruthie. I mean, you definitely have been like studying this and having lived it, you know, so it's always fun to talk with someone who has their own parallel experience.
Oh, definitely. It's been awesome talking to you.
Yeah, likewise.
We have similar experiences. That is amazing.
Yeah. Well, really nice talking with you, and maybe we'll get to do it again sometime.
That would be awesome.
All right. Thanks so much. Bye, everyone. Stay healthy, stay safe, and stay sane.